My name is Grace Moss, and I am the Director of Talent Development and Inclusion at NBC Entertainment. The 72-hour shootout is really unique because, first and foremost, the obvious time constraint of creating something that's 5 minutes in 3 days. And I think when you are forced to really create and collaborate in such a short amount of time, it really forces the creators to think outside the box, be really resourceful, and be really creative. So I think it's a great way and a great format to really develop the skills of these filmmakers and actors and editors to create a great product. And secondly, I think the 72-hour shootout is just a great way of bringing people together who may not work together all the time, and it's just such a collaborative effort. And to also compete with other teams worldwide is a really cool component as well. Young filmmakers of color should participate in the 72-hour shootout for 2 reasons. Number one, just the practice of creating content and being put on the spot to work with others right away and just turn something around is something that you don't get to do very often. In bigger projects, you have more time to prep and rehearse, and to put yourself in a situation to create content in 3 days is a really great way to develop those creative and production muscles. And then secondarily, I think in this industry, it's all about hustling, right? And the more that you can participate in festivals and get your name out there and work with others and different organizations, the better it is for you, because you're building your Rolodex of contacts and you're really finding as many platforms as you can to just expose your work. And I think that's really huge in this industry and really important. It's a very chaotic time in our country right now with our current leader, who clearly has issues with women and people of color and immigrants. And I feel that under his administration that people feel that they now have a pass to behave in certain ways and vocalize more so than before. And I think a project like Mirror Mirror is important because it really addresses, sexism and racism in the workplace, and makes all of us think about it, confront it, but in a fun and funny way. So it's just something that's really digestible and addresses issues that are relevant and important right now. I think since Trump came into office, there has really been a boom in comedy. Obviously in late night, he's just such a punching bag and creates so much fodder for comedy and humor. But I think it also is giving voice to a lot of comedians to just create content. I think right now in this time, having comedy is a great outlet to express your frustration and also bond with others about this commonality that we're all facing. I think that it's important for young filmmakers to have a platform to share and express their feelings, because I think the content out there needs to reflect society. Number one, how we look as a society in terms of having women and people of color. And number two, just to touch on issues that face our communities and real issues and frustrations that we're all facing now, from like racism to homophobia to xenophobia. And I think it's important that there's an outlet to address that. And I think having a platform like NBC or other networks or cable providers and streaming platforms is important because these stories need to be told. And I think because TV is doing so well right now, I think it's a good thing because there are more and more outlets for these stories to get out there. So last year, of all of NBC's pilots, none of them were directed by women. And we recognized that, and we acted quickly to address that issue. And we created an initiative called Female Forward, where 10 female directors will get an opportunity to shadow on 10 different NBC shows and be guaranteed an episode to direct in the same season. And these are first-time episodic directors, completely talented and have the talent and the skill to do it. They just haven't necessarily broken into episodic TV yet. Yeah. So this is a really groundbreaking initiative where we will introduce 10 new directors into the TV landscape. We also have our late night writers workshop, which through the 6 years of the program, I would say at least 5 or more women from that program are now working actively in late night and have really shifted those numbers. We've got women on Seth Meyers, James Corden, Stephen Colbert, and also working on our scripted shows as well. So I think through programs like Late Night Writers Workshop and Female Forward, we are actively finding the talent and doing our best to plant them into our programming. At NBC, we have several programs that are really trying to change the landscape in terms of increasing women and people of color into our writers' rooms and in front of the screen. I think the biggest obstacle to really make a bigger impact with that are the external forces. We can only do so much in terms of providing the talent and referring them and making those connections, but ultimately those decision makers who are the key folks in hiring are the ones who can decide. Right. And I mean, that's a good and a bad thing. I think it's good because we don't want to force this diverse talent on a show and just assign them and say, hey, you have to have this person in your writer's room. But on the other hand, it sometimes can take a little bit longer for execs and showrunners and other folks to buy in and really understand the importance of having a diverse and inclusive staff. I think the wage gap in this industry is obviously crazy and insane, and I unfortunately don't think it's gonna be alleviated anytime soon. It's something that has been institutionalized for decades and decades and generations of people in this industry. I think the first step, though, to create some sort of movement for this parity is to really employ more women first and foremost. And, NBC has our Female Forward initiative, which will break 10 first-time female directors on our network. And I think that's the first step to doing that. I think if more networks and studios just actively promote women and give them work, that will slowly, move the dial a little bit. The industry can definitely do a lot better in terms of getting people from more diverse backgrounds into the system. I think first and foremost, at least in television, it's all about the writer's room. And I think if you get more diverse writers in the writer's room that dictate the stories that will be told, then that will feed into the casting, and that'll feed into the directors, and overall just telling stories that we're not necessarily hearing right now. So I think getting writers in the writer's room is first and foremost. I think beyond that, also when it comes to TV, is really hiring those on the production staff that look like us. That could be folks like the showrunner, who ideally cast and write all the cast and get the writer's room staffed up, but also even the department heads. Right now, a lot of those key folks in production aren't people of color, just because I think historically folks want to hire the same crew, and then that crew will bring in their crew, and it's very hard to break into that circle. And I think when you have costume designers and DPs that bring a different perspective and a unique perspective, it'll just really create stronger and greater content. And I think that will also create additional platforms for these people to get work.